Yo, what's poppin' everyone? Welcome back to another week of the best decks in our format. This week's actually going to be featuring Paradox Rift, so some of these might be a little bit of guesstimations, but you want to know what? I went through the list, made pretty solid lists for every single archetype, looked through the information from play limitless events that were going on around, took a lot of inspiration from around the internet, so this video is going to be a pretty good spot to kind of see where the metagame is shaping up heading into the Latin American International Championships and the first weeks of Paradox Rift being legal. That being said, lists are going to be available in the pinned comment in the description, so stay tuned for that. And I hope that everyone enjoys this kind of video and sees exactly what else is going on. So give this video a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and let's jump into our 10th best deck in our format. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. Kicking off our list is actually the World Championship winning deck. Back from August, that was back in August. Fusion Mew. Now, where Fusion Mew, you might be like, okay, Roaring Moon exists in this format, why would you really play this? This deck does pretty well against the non-dark decks in this format. And it's an aggressive deck, we're in aggressive formats, and I think it's really worthwhile to be playing a deck like this in a format. So whether it's Mew, Miraidon, Roaring Moon, aggressiveness is always going to be good, and even if you're unfavored, you're probably closer to winning the game than you think. Now, something like this deck doesn't gain much. I think the only new card in this list is Professor Turo Scenario, which has replaced kind of Penny in my opinion, because Professor Turo can work on any of your Pokemon in play, giving yourself some opportunities there. Also, forgive me if I'm incorrect on any kind of new cards when it comes to this video, just as a kind of disclaimer placeholder. I'm still learning this set as everyone else is, and it just released, so we're trying. But yeah, I think that it adds some elements of depth when it comes to this deck. I think that the Meloetta line, one Meloetta to attack your opponent's Pokemon very quickly, Ice Q to maybe finish off something like knocking a Frigibax on your opponent's bench, or knocking out a Roaring Moon after it's taken some damage seems kind of good. So this is kind of where I'd want to put Mew. I think others might put it higher. After my testing and kind of overview of kind of the top 10 decks, I don't really see where this deck could go beyond the bottom half of the top 10, and it might enter and exit. I think it's definitely going to be a top 10 deck. That's why I put it at 10th. So this ranking is loosely based off of Limitless rankings, on top of my own personal opinion on decks. And to anyone else who's wondering how that goes, I am a current top 16 player in North America, who's played in every single major event so far this season, and I will be attending Latin American International Championships. So just wanted to let y'all know in case you didn't know, but if you're watching, maybe you know. So yeah, this is where we're going to go at number 10. If you need any of the cards for these decks, be sure to check out our sponsors at decogaming.ca, at AtlasCollectibles.com, and PTCGLstore.com for your sealed singles, your PTCGL codes. All the discounts are available in the description. We also have lists that get updated all the time in our Patreon, so you go to patreon.com/TSSWin and pledge there to support the squad. I promise I'm not going to shout that out too many other times, but I do want to let everyone know as we're kind of starting this video. Let's jump into our number 9 spot. Jumping into our number 9 spot, we have Block Snorlax Control. I believe this is Cal Connor's list from a Limitless tournament from Shuffle Squad, so shout out to them. This deck might be a little bit more annoying, and it just got some new tools when it comes down to it. So if Snorlax is an active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon cannot retreat. So you have Snorlax there, and your whole goal is to get behind on a prize card because your opponent could easily knock one of these Pokemon out. Then you use Counter Catcher and keep on bringing up Pokemon that get more and more difficult. So not only can they not retreat, maybe they can't attack. And then you use other cards like Erica's Invitation and Misfortune Sisters to eventually deck out your opponent. We have a lot of different tools here. Arvin allowing us to search out things like Luxurious Cape, Bravery Charm, Forest Steel Stone. We have pennies, so that if any of our Pokemon are damaged or are half damaged, we can just lift those Pokemon back. We have Iono to disrupt our opponent's hands. We have Erica's Invitation to invite Pokemon into play that weren't invited into play. Avery to reduce their damage output, depending if it's bench reliant or not. And we can also just disrupt their bench. Sydney allows us to peek in and grab other cards from their hands. Giacomo allowing us to discard special energies. Peonia allowing us to have access to our prize cards. Silene and Team Yell's Cheer to allow for an infinite loop, along with Pidgeot V. We even have Temple of Sinnoh in case your opponent plays Jet Energies. So we have a lot of ways for Pokemon to stick in the active. Some decks just don't have answers to this. Some decks will have answers to this. So whether you like or not control decks or playing against them, it is here in this format. It is a top 10 deck as of right now. Will that play out in a format where people are making their own actions and there's not a computer telling them to do that? Maybe control typically has a lower conversion in real life because it takes a long time to play, and some opponents do play slow against control. It's within your right to call a judge if your opponent's slow playing, but it's also one of those things where it's hard to complete games when your win con is not a traditional win con, so that might lead to some players not playing this deck as often as others. So interesting deck here for sure. Be sure to check it out. If you don't want to play it, maybe try some games against it to know how your deck might be able to play it. Again, not a large percentage of the metagame, but it is quite effective in this format. Flying high to our number 8 spot is Lugia V-Star colorless version. Lugia's not really so colorless anymore, as you can see that there's lightning, dark, psychic, fire, and colorless attackers. Really the only colorless Pokemon in the deck are Archeops, Lugia, and Snorlax. This deck kind of gained a coat of fresh paint with Earthen Vessel in the format, allowing us extra opportunities to discard Archeops. When we're able to discard Archeops a little bit more consistently, even if we don't want to search for the energies with Earthen Vessel, we are going to see a little bit more success. However, we are in the same format where Iron Hands exists, and Iron Hands can turn to clap a Lugia V-Star, or even turn 1 in some cases, drawing 3 prize cards. That's something to be scared of, but it's also something that we can control ourselves with Iron Hands. So keep that in mind. This deck does have a box of tricks, whether it comes from drawing extra prize cards from Iron Hands, knocking out Mew VMAX, or Dark weak Pokemon with Drapion V. Mew EX is kind of putting your whole deck against you, and Radiant Charizard is a strong single prize card attacker. On top of Snorlax being able to stop things such as Lost Impact or Lost Mine. Really, this deck seems it's really good on paper. It plays out really nicely. It just depends on how the metagame shifts up. If you're going to hit up a whole bunch of like lightning type decks, you're probably having a tough time. If you're going to get turn 1 Roaring Moons, you're probably going to have a tough time. If you're playing against a lot of other decks though in format, it seems like Lugia has all the tricks it needs, and it's kind of getting closer to its old true form that we saw debut at last year's LAIC when we played Stoutland and powerful colorless energy. So I really do think that Lugia V-Star is quite powerful. 8 might be a little bit too low. We'll have to see as the format develops going forward into the Latin American International Championships. Sliding into our number 7 list here is Roaring Moon EX Lost Zone Edition. Now, this isn't a deck that I thought that I'd be including in here. I thought it would probably be Lost Zone Turbo, and that's kind of where my testing has brought us. However, when it comes to the results on Limitless, it seems like Lost Zone Roaring Moon seems to be doing quite well, and that's something to really consider as we kind of go through our metagame here. I kind of explain it like this. We have Sableye, Cramorant, and Radiant Greninja for the small stuff, the Pokemon that aren't really big. And mid to late game, we have access to Frenzied Gouging and Calamity Storm to really hurt our opponent while they're down. I think that this deck is kind of interesting because in the same way that Lost Tina can just knock out things with its GG end attack, whatever it's called, the one that OHKOs anything, and you build up 10 to the Lost Zone. You can just OHKO anything mid-game with Roaring Moon EX. Like, you can use Cramorant and Sableye early game to knock out a bunch of Charmanders, and then use Frenzied Gouging to knock out a Charizard EX with 330 HP out of nowhere. And I think that that kind of power exists. I don't remember exactly where I grabbed this list from. I think I actually edited it from all the lists that I saw. But if you're the one who played this list or anything else like that, or if it's heavily inspired, I did check out the playlimitlist.dex page, or whatever it was. I think it looks cool, and I think that's where I'm at. Where I think this deck looks good. It looks cool. It kind of solves a lot of issues within each individual deck of Lost Stonebox and Roaring Moon EX. So certainly give it a try when it comes to playing in this format. I think it's a good deck. We'll have to see how it plays out. Psychic embracing its way into number 6 is Gardevoir EX. And Gardevoir EX didn't really gain too much. I mean, we gained Counter Catcher and we gained Screamtail. And I guess in some ways we also gained Mewtwo EX. However, that might be hard to accelerate energies onto. Regardless, I think that Screamtail adds a different element to this deck of another single prize card Pokemon that we can now use to snipe our opponent's Pokemon for a large amount of damage. Screamtail could be that late game boss that we were looking for, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I don't play Palpad in this deck, because we can kind of Screamtail for victory, or Cresselia for something smaller, or however we want to really do it. I think that there's a lot of cool ideas when it comes to this deck in play, and late game we can use Counter Catcher, and the deck seems legit, right? When we just look at it like on paper, Spiritomb helps solve our Mew issues. We're going to accelerate a bunch of energies. Gardevoir is come second at Worlds, second at Internats, top 4 at Internats. It's seen a lot of success, and as much as I don't see the hype for Gardevoir right now, I don't see a world where it does not see success in Sao Paulo. The players that play Gardevoir typically play Gardevoir a lot. So they're really well connected to this deck and the changes to the deck, and even though the list looks the same, they're just playing the deck better than most people. So keep that in mind when it comes down to it. I think if you're a Gardevoir player, this might be a really good call going forward. You gotta watch out for Iron Hands, but if you avoid Iron Hands for a while, then you're probably having a good day. And everyone's trying to avoid something, right? So when that comes down to it, like I think there's a lot of things that we just want to avoid in general. But right now, to me, this is a very, very, very solid play as we approach the metagame going forward. Kicking into the halfway mark at number 5, we do have Miraidon EX. Now, Miraidon EX is, it gained 3-ish cards, maybe 4-ish cards. I'm looking at the list right now as we're kind of going through. Miraidon EX now has access to Iron Hands EX. I think, like, it's one of those cards that I was debating including in this deck because 4 energies for this deck is kind of hard to get to. However, if you just run into a Lost Zone box deck, or for example like that, one of the more difficult matchup single prize card decks when it comes to Miraidon, Iron Hands EX should be able to cook those. So we're able to kind of get that going really early. Next new card that we added in here is Elekid. Now, Elekid takes our spot as the Flying Pikachu. And I think my whole reason for playing this is because Roaring Moon, you can basically, they put 200 damage on themselves to get a knockout, and you put 30 on that Pokemon. I think Elekid is a great finisher for 0 energies, free retreats, and if you need it, that's cool, beyond a Mew EX. If you don't need it, that's also cool. The deck's not really as reliant as going search for Flying Pikachu, grab free retreater, and a built-in Forest Steel Stone user. So I think the 30 snipe is kind of cute on the Elekid. It's not absolutely necessary, and if it does not work out like that, it does not work out like that. But with Bravery Charm being in play, and if they do not have Ancient Booster Capsule, Ancient Energy Booster Capsule, it's a mouthful, on their Roaring Moon, Elekid can definitely sneak in and take a prize card off their Roaring Moon. Tapu Koko EX does give us an opportunity to auto-paralyze our opponent's Pokemon, which kind of took the need for Flying Pikachu as well. Everything else pretty much remains the same, except we've now added in a copy of Counter Catcher that we could search from Arvin, giving us more options when it comes to this deck. Not that I want to necessarily be behind on prize cards, but it does seem quite good. Overall, I like how Miraidon looks on paper. It's a really, like, it was arguably one of the most successful decks in our last formats. I think that Andrew Mahone and that kind of group of players really saw a lot of success with it at regionals. I wouldn't be surprised if their well-chiseled built list transitioned really well. As you can see, I've just fundamentally changed a few cards, and I feel like this is a very powerful Miraidon list going forward. So be sure to give it a try. And if you're missing any of the cards like Elekid, be sure to check out deckoutgaming.ca, atlascollectibles.com, and PTCGL store for all your needs to support the Shuffle Squad. We do have discounts available in the description. Lost impacting into our number 4 spot is going to be Tina V-Star and the Lost Zone kind of package. Now, I think that this deck, it's weird because it kind of took a back seat where it was not super successful towards the end of our format. And that had a lot to do with like Lugia really seeing a lot of play, being one of the best decks in format throughout the entire thing. Mew EX was kind of hyped a lot from Pokemon 151, and a lot of players were experimenting it towards the latter half of the regionals available in our Obsidian Flames Pokemon 151 formats. And now we're kind of in a place where it's like, okay, the metagame's kind of settled, there's other decks available in formats, and Tina seems to do well against a lot of the decks, and oh yeah, it got Counter Catcher as well. Now, one thing that I do want to put out here is I might go to a list that goes back down to the Psychic, Grass, and Jet Energy list. I think we can maybe get rid of some of our energies when it comes down to it. But right now, I think overall it looks really good. I might have one too many switching outs here when it comes down to it as well. I think maybe I can get rid of one switch card or one escape rope and add in another counter catcher. That's really the changes that I'm looking to make to this list. There's not much else that I want to be making to this list at all. I think Tina's really, really, really well constructed deck. I think Tina is well positioned in our metagame. And whether you decide to play Waters or not, depending on how the metagame shifts up, I could see it going either way. Counter Catcher does add elements of going Roxanne, then playing Counter Catcher, then knocking out your opponent's Pokemon, ending everything. It's kind of like how you want to play Boss and Colress in the same turn, but then you're like, then you can't play 2 supporters, right? Counter Catcher is kind of like playing a second supporter when you think about it. Obviously, you have to be behind on prize cards, but Tina lives from behind with the Roxanne Path combo, so look into this deck a little bit more. I think that I'm going to have to put on my Tina hat again and really become a supporter of this deck again. Looks quite strong heading into LAIC. Shivery chillin' all the way to number 3 is going to be Chien-Pao Baxcalibur with the addition of Iron Hands. I've been cooking this list for a minute, and I feel like this has to be the list. I look at it and I'm like, yeah, you want to know what? It takes the success of what Lucas Singh, Grant Shen, Kieran Farah have all seen throughout our regional season and worlds, and applies Iron Hands EX to it, and updates the deck to see a little bit more success. And I think that's really where the deck fundamental is going to be going forward. Like, we go turn 1, set up, we go turn 2, and we're going Hailblade, or we're going Ampy very much. And I think that's really the whole core purpose of this deck. I like how it plays out a lot. I like how the list looks. I like how its matchup spread looks. There's a lot of little pieces going on here, and I think like that's where I'm at when it comes to this deck. There's pieces that we want to be testing. There's things that we're trying to learn. Right now, I think that Chien-Pao is a pretty well developed deck, and I don't see changes. Like, this deck is almost the exact same thing as Blastoise, Black Kyurem from 10 years ago. We have the roadmap. We understand how this deck should look. I don't see why this deck is not one of the most successful decks at LAIC. And maybe it's going to be matchups, maybe it's going to be a lot of things, but right now, if you are looking to play Chien-Pao, this is my personal list, well tested, well chiseled out, and I think that it's going to be quite strong in the given format. So give it a try. Chien-Pao is probably about as real as it gets. And one thing that I do like looking towards in an early format is decks that have previously seen success in other formats. So kind of even like the Mew VMAX. I don't think Mew VMAX is the most powerful. We know what a Mew VMAX list looks like. We're not experimenting with it. Whereas it comes to something new like Iron Valiant, that deck has not necessarily seen as much success. So let's see how it plays out there. But right now, super happy with this build. Burning Darkness all the way to number 2 is Charizard EX. Now, Charizard EX here is, it got a kind of new fresh coat of paint, And you can see that from the Charmander and Charmeleon line. We're not running a 4-1-4 line. We are now running, or not 4-1-4, a 4-1-3 line. We are now running a 4-3-3 line. And that has to go with Technical Machine Evolution, allowing us to evolve our Pokemon. So we can kind of search that out with Arven, and we're ready to go. Now, there's some things that I might want to address with this list, because this is a list that I've been working on for a minute, and technically looking over and stuff like that. The whole strategy of this deck is to use Charizard, get Burning Darkness off, but we're going to be evolving from whatever Pokemon we decide to slap on Technical Evolution, slap on an Energy there, and then search for a couple evolutions. We now have access to Bibarel, so we're not going to have direct search, but we do have Arven that allows us to search for our Pokemon. We don't need to search for as many Pokemon. Toedscruel does allow us to have answers against Chien-Pao, which have previously been very difficult matchups, alongside stopping things like Pokestop on our opponent's side, if they do run into it. The build is there. I think the trainer line is really good. There was a Japanese pretty big event. I think it was like 8 players. But when I'm saying pretty big, I think it was like an invite-only event. Jake Earhart tweeted about it anyways. And this build-ish was featured in the thing. And I think a lot of things I agreed with. It's like taking core from the Arven-Zard build that saw success last format. I know that I had 2-day 2s with it in the last format, so that sounds pretty cool. Countercatcher looks really good in this deck because we can play from behind going second, so we can use Technical Machine Evolution on our first turn. Things that I might want to change about this deck. I might want to add in an Earthen Vessel or an Energy Search, so that when you go off that initial Arven and you're searching for a Technical Machine Evolution, we have access to an Energy. If we don't have an Energy, we can't use Technical Machine Evolution. It's still an attack, right? So that's kind of step one. I don't know if Defiance Band is better than Vitality Band or Choice Belt. We'll have to see how that plays out. I wouldn't mind to see a Path to the Peak in this deck. So cutting a Town Store for that's something to consider. And I also think I might want to have another Rare Candy. I did cut a Rare Candy from the list for an Escape Rope. I do think I like Escape Rope, but I go on this back and forth. Am I worried too much about things like... am I worried about Lost in Box too much? Am I worried about... and that's why I have Jirachi. Am I worried about bench sniping with Manaphy? Am I worried about wrong cards with Radiant Charizard? Like, do I need Radiant Charizard? Do I need to worry about a lot of things? Like, I think that's where I'm at with this list. So, lots of cool things going on here. This list is really close to being perfect. I can see it. But give it a try. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Also, let me know what you think our number 1 deck is going to be. I mean, you might have a hunch, and maybe you're like, yo, Zach, you forgot about this deck, or you did not put this deck, or why did you not put on Goldango on this list? I got a lot of things going on there, right? So let's talk about it. Let's bring it to the comments for sure. Let's jump into our number 1 deck and see what we got going on. Boom, here you have it, Roaring Moon EX. Now, Roaring Moon EX is very powerful. The goal of this build is to turn 1 use Frenzied Gouging or Calamity Storm, depending on how much HP your opponent's Pokemon has. I think that this is kind of like a very strong tournament build. There might be a couple changes that I might want to go here. I don't know how I feel about Brute Bonnet. I might want to cut Brute Bonnet for another Morpeko. Morpeko has been pretty goated to start with because it kind of has free retreats based off its ability. Yeah, those cards are very good. That could also lead us to cutting to an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. And those cards can be added for extra Pokegears or other cards that might just be more consistent in this deck. Or maybe even like a 1-1 Bibarel line. I could easily see that getting added into this deck so that maybe we have some mid to late game kind of pressure or things that we can kind of change up. I could also see this deck adding more single prize card attackers like Galarian Moltres, the baby one. But overall, being able to just rip your opponent's Pokemon to shreds is turning this into better Miraidon in a lot of cases. Or at least better Miraidon in theory. And I think this is an evolving archetype. One thing that might be a little bit different than a lot of the lists that are seeing success is I've added Energy Switch in here. So you can Energy Switch from one of the Pokemon that you've used Professor Sada's Vitality on. So let's say you started with Radiant Greninja, which seems to be the Pokemon I start with 99% of the time on PTCG Live. If you feel like PTCG Live starts you with the wrong Pokemon or gives you some scuffed hands from time to time, give this video a thumbs up and give it a like. Let me know how you feel about that in the comments, but regardless, and that's clearly a joke, any PTCG Live developers. We love this game. Radiant Greninja seems to be the Pokemon that I start with way more often than I should. One of the reasons why I want another Morpeko. And I don't always have an energy to retreat it. So having an energy switch to move energies around give us an extra energy. Because I'll have the energy in play, I might not have the energy on play that I want it attached to. Because I can't Professor Seta's Vitality to a Radiant Greninja. It is not an ancient Pokemon. But yeah, I think this is a very, very, very solid build of the deck. Taking a lot of inspiration from other lists online. Give it a try. That's all I could say is give it a try. I think this deck is very good, but I could easily see us adding some more consistency cards just to make this deck a little bit more stable. Beyond that, to me, I think that Roaring Moon EX is just a very strong concept. So let's give it a try and see how it goes. But yeah, super solid build. And that's what we got going on for our video today. Hopefully you enjoyed learning more about our metagames, seeing exactly whatever's going on. And I will catch up with all y'all real soon. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, let me know in the comments. I'd totally love to talk things over with all y'all and see exactly what's going on. Right now, the metagame's kind of wild. And I'm sure I'm going to be like, you want to know what? I haven't tested that deck enough. I'm going to change this. There's already a few counts that I'm thinking about changing in some of these decks, and a few decks that might be in the top 10 as we approach LAIC. Again, LAIC is getting up there pretty soon, so stay tuned for this great change to the metagame, and seeing a lot of Shuffle Squad members at the Latin American International Championships. That being said, I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Hey trainers! Tired of having too many cards lying around? I know that feeling, and I know what a hassle it is to try and sell those cards. But selling bulk is now easier than ever with TCG Bulk. Find tons of potential buyers in a single place. You just download the app, look for the best buyer near you, and carefully pack your bulk, ship it, and you get paid. It really is that simple. Turn the cards you don't want into the cards you absolutely need for your next deck. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.